Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from today. Thank you for joining our live stream today to talk about ERP software support and maintenance in ERP implementations, in really third-party options. What are your options in the ERP software space? That's what we're going to talk about here today. And this is an especially relevant topic since so many organizations right now are grappling with how do we get off our legacy system and move to a cloud solution in light of vendor sunset deadlines and vendor maintenance deadlines. So this is an extremely relevant topic, in my opinion. For those of you, especially those of you that are using legacy systems, trying to figure out how to navigate that transition over to the cloud. We're going to introduce our guest here in just a moment, but this podcast will become part of two podcasts we do right now. One is called Transformation Ground Control. You can find episodes of that show at transformationgroundcontrol.com. We have another podcast called Journey to S4HANA. Journey to S4HANA.com is where you can find those episodes. And this interview is being produced live with a live audience here today. So thank you for being here. And it's going to be used on both of those podcasts once we edit it and add more stuff to it. So thanks for being here today. A couple logistical things. First of all, I have some questions to start with our guest to dive into this topic in a little bit more detail. But I'd love to hear your questions from the audience. So anything you guys have as far as questions or things you want to talk about, love to hear those along the way. And speaking of questions and chat, we're watching the chat across all the platforms right now. If you don't mind just dropping in the chat what city and country you're joining from today. We tend to get a global audience, so I always love to see where everyone's joining from today. So drop in the chat if you don't mind, city and country you're joining from. Both my guest and I are here in Denver, Colorado, coincidentally. So look forward to hearing from the audience here. So again, today's topic is ERP software support and maintenance. What are your third-party options? And that's exactly what we're going to cover today. And joining me today is the CEO of Spinnaker Support, Matt Stava. Matt, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
Great to have you on the show. Finally, it's your guest I've actually wanted to have on here for quite some time because you sort of helped pioneer this third-party support and maintenance space. But what can you tell us before we get into some of these questions here that I've got for you and that the audience is going to have for you? Tell us a little bit about you, yourself, your journey, and about Spinnaker as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, you bet. I'll go through that. I started my career at Anderson Consulting. It kind of shows my age a little bit here, but now it's called Accenture. And, I got started right out of college, one of those early folks that they bring on to these big, kind of unload the bus, so to speak, in these big projects back in those days. Did that for about 4.5 years, kind of got my manager stripes. And then I ended up leaving there and going to another firm that was really all ex-Anderson folks, pretty small. And at that point, I led their supply chain kind of implementation practice area, if you will, across all the different platforms that were software packages back then. Got a lot of experience very early in my life, kind of thrown in the deep end, if you know what I mean, both with Anderson and then with this other firm. Stayed with them for about 4 years. They ended up getting bought by Perot Systems in those days. Now that's owned by Dell. But I kind of realized I'm going to hang my own shingle, or I'm going to go back to Accenture at that point, and decided to hang a shingle in 2002 and started out doing supply chain consulting because that's really what I knew how to do. And as many things do, they evolved quite a bit. We kept the consulting business, and it's actually still going and going strong. I'm out of it entirely now, but then along the way, we ended up acquiring a remanufacturing, redistribution business that was bringing product back in, kind of internal supply chain stuff, reverse supply chain, I should say. And they had that business. We had the consulting. We had this returns management business, and then we had the opportunity here in Denver with the local J.D. Edwards team of a third-party provider that was really get shut down. They were owned by SAP at the time. And SAP and Oracle were in a little bit of a tussle of a lawsuit around this space. And we had the opportunity to bring the J.D. Edwards group over, and that was in 2008. And that's really when this thing really started to take off for us. I mean, there was some early years, right, kind of slower, if you will. But at the end of the day, that's really what the company is now. So I've jettisoned all the other businesses that I've ever was involved with, and full time obviously in this one, and it's a blast. I absolutely love it. It's grown a lot, and it's been fun to watch what we're able to do for customers out there in the world. And it's and I know we'll get into it a little bit too, Eric, but it's global. It's got people all over the world working 24/7, 365, and just the value that we provide customers has been really exciting, and I've got a lot of good stories on some of those things. So it's pretty cool. But that's really where we've gotten, and that's where we are today. So.
That's great. That's an awesome journey. How did you, make that transition from supply chain and consulting into ERP? I know you mentioned you acquired that JD Edwards support
Yeah, we brought
practice,
that.
but was that sort of an accident? You sort of stumbled into an opportunity, or did you deliberately want to move into the ERP space?
Well, I think the ERP space is large, and back then the supply chain space wasn't quite as big, although it's grown a lot in that and since that period of time. But the ERP space we knew was very large. What I wanted to get into was really a larger market, ERP being one of them, and certainly one that we were right there on the side of, right? Because any supply chain application integrates into JD Edwards, integrates into Oracle, SAP, these different things. So you were right on the periphery of all these things anyway. Had a lot of experience with that. But the recurring kind of model of it all on the support side is something that I was really trying to get the company moved into that direction. And fortunately, knock on a lot of wood, it's been pretty successful for us. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah. What do you like most about the company, about Spinnaker so far?
I tell you what, there's a few things. One is just the customer satisfaction is really cool. I mean, what we do for our clients out there, it's not just save them a couple dollars, save them a couple bucks or shekels or anything like that. It's really more the value we provide. So I'll give you an example. I mean, it's almost like a concierge doctor. You don't even know how to handle them. You know what I mean? I mean, when we start with a customer, oftentimes they've got 30, 40, 80 different issues, I'll call it, or questions or inquiries into Oracle or into SAP, that SAP or Oracle just come back and said, either hire a consulting firm, they'll help you out, or that's not going to get fixed ever. Just wait, maybe in a version in 3 years or something like that. And so customers kind of get stuck, and you learn to deal with that. It's a little bit like a laptop has a little quirk to it. You just learn to work around that quirk, right? Mm-hmm. These customers out there just kind of get these issues sitting there. So day one, literally the first thing we say is send all those over as issues. We'll log those into our system, and we start working those things off. And it's amazing in 2-3 months, something like that these things get solved. It's really incredible to watch. And all of a sudden customers are just doing backflips that they can get these things done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I mean, having that kind of impact in filling that void with what software vendors are able to provide themselves, I think is super fascinating.
That's right.
So let's start off like real fundamental basic stuff for maybe those of us that don't know what third-party support is. Can you kind of explain the model? Like what exactly is third-party support, and how is that different from what a software vendor is going to provide to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's like you said, it's very fundamental, obviously. The third-party support market is effectively, companies buy licenses, right? And they pay $10 million for licenses with Oracle, whatever it is. And then you've got that stream of maintenance that Oracle, charges you annually. So every year, then you've got to pay $2.2 million on that, 22%. It ranges, I think, from 19 to 22, something like that. And you just put that into your IT budget. And next thing you know, you're just paying that every year. That's a lot of why the value of Oracle, the value of SAP is so high. It's that maintenance stream. It's not necessarily the license sale itself. So once you have that, then you've got a support problem, right? You've got to figure out how to maintain those systems and keep them up and running. So you hire a managed services group, for example, to help you really do the care and feeding every day. What we've done is we've come in and said, listen, you don't have to pay that $2 million anymore. You can come over to us. We save our customers on average around 60% off of that number. So yes, there's a big savings. And so customers that are in some sort of duress or distress, it's a very helpful, handy thing to have in terms of a tool in the tool belt. But effectively, we're saying cut off that support with Oracle or SAP, switch it over to us, and here's the things that we can do for you. So there's a few things you get from the vendor that you can't live without, so to speak. One of them is the tax and regulatory support. So if you're in Japan and you've got a depreciation table and that depreciation schedule changes from the Japanese government, you need to make sure that gets programmed into your system. So we've got a whole team of people that do nothing but research tax and regulatory issues out there, changes out there, and make sure we get those into the customer system. So that's very important. The other one is security, the security patches. And so we've got a solution for security patches that is really beyond what even the vendor can provide themselves. We've had a lot of third-party validation of this security solution. So that's a big one too that you need to get. The one item that we can't provide is we don't own the software. We don't own the IP, and we have no rights to that IP. And so as part of the process of switching over from a vendor to a third-party provider like us is you want to do an archive. You want to bring down out of the cloud, out of Oracle or SAP's library, all the patches, upgrades, and changes that you have the rights to. You've paid your maintenance stream. You might not have ever downloaded those things because you only download it when you need it. But we go through and we have an archiving process that we walk through with our clients to make sure we've got the software that you have the rights to, that you paid for. But once you cut over, you lose the rights to that software in the future. So many of our customers, most of all of them, are at a platform level where they feel very comfortable. Like, some of them say, hey, I can't do it this year. I'm going to switch over next year. I've got to upgrade to this one version of a database or one version of an application. Once I get there, then I'm comfortable moving on to a third party, because we can't provide the upgrades any further unless they're in the archive that we've got. So there's some benefits and some drawbacks. That's one of them. But certainly, from our perspective, people make that switch over. They get a couple of bucks of savings, which is terrific, but they stay for the service. Like I said earlier, they just can't believe that service really exists out there. And so that savings then can really be driven into a lot more value added applications, migrations, transitions that a customer wants to do inside. A CIO now can fund projects to really value the business or give value to the business that he wasn't or she wasn't able to do before. So it's good. It's really cool to watch that as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I always thought of third-party support and maintenance like Spinnaker. I always thought of it as a cost savings play, which it is. But
it is. Sure.
What you're saying is it sounds like the added value of just basically getting more functionality, more capabilities, and more alignment with what your needs are. It sounds like that could be even greater than the cost savings itself.
It really is. I mean, I think they come for the cost savings and stay for the service, if you know what I mean, right? They realize this is a good play. This is something we should be doing. Gartner and Forrester and some of these large analyst firms out there follow this. Gartner has full-time analysts just following the third-party maintenance market now, support market. And so we get a lot of opportunities kind of through that. But the validation is there that this is a tool in the tool belt that CIOs should be considering. And so there's some timing elements that kind of go along with that, and something we work with prospects every day, all day on. But they don't realize the service could be that good, if that makes sense, right? And that's that's getting back to why I really enjoy it. It's really fun to watch that, kind of hear that result out of some of the CIOs that I meet with. Yeah.
Now, what about the software vendors and how they sort of fit into this? I mean, first of all, I have to ask you, what do software vendors think of this model? I mean, do they like it? Or they see it as more of a threat?
Yeah, it's a great question. They're not terribly excited about it. Right.
Because you're cutting into their revenue.
We're cutting into the revenue, right? But there's some clear lines, right, in terms of what you can and can't do with respect to the software vendors. We know what those lines are. We've had varying degrees of relationships with the vendors over the years, but nothing real specific or direct at all. It's something that they've openly stated. The third-party market is something out there that's valid, that people can do. I understand it. We get it. It kind of creates an off ramp for some of these customers out there of them. It creates a little bit of an off ramp, and then sometimes we get back onto it a little bit as well, and help them get back to the software vendor. That's not the end of the world for us as well. Sometimes they go back and they say, hey, we just want to get the latest thing. They go back for a year or two, and then they'll switch back onto third-party maintenance and bring their applications back to us. So
that's
a lot of different scenarios.
So speaking of the vendors then, and kind of who owns the rights to the software, like you said, or who owns the IP? You mentioned that you don't own the IP, which is totally understandable. Of course you don't. I don't think anyone would expect that you do. But what do you say to people that say, well, why would I use a third-party support option even if I save money and even if I could get more value? I'm worried that you're not going to have the same knowledge in that direct line of sight into the software vendor, the people actually creating the software, the people that created the software. How do you guys respond to that, or what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, if you really, it's a little bit like, buying a Lexus from the Lexus dealership, and you have a 3-year warranty or a 1-year warranty, whatever your warranty is. Lexus obviously built the car. They know how the car operates, right? But then some of the best Lexus maintenance guys inside that maintenance shop probably went down the street and started their own shop. And so they actually know more than Lexus themselves. They're some of the best maintenance providers out there. And that's really the team that we've assembled. We've got several hundred engineers around the world that have anywhere from 15 to literally 30 years of experience inside Oracle or SAP. They know and they've seen just about every issue that's ever come up. much of the support mechanisms now inside SAP and inside Oracle are self-service anyway. You're literally logging in, identifying the problem, trying to figure out which patch to download to actually update, and that is something that we just kind of do every day, all day. So it's something that we're very used to doing for these customers.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because the Lexus analogy, it's a really interesting one because I was actually thinking about all these different examples in the consumer world. You think about, like you said, Lexus and cars, even just like your
Yeah.
Apple iPhone. You
Yep.
could buy Apple accessories that are produced by Apple, or you could buy tons of different third-party ones,
That's right.
and no one really bats an eye at that. But it's interesting how in this enterprise technology space, it just seems like more of not a novelty, but it seems like a newer thing,
Yeah.
at least in my opinion, because it hasn't been around nearly as long as software vendors have been around. So has it taken a while for this model that you guys have sort of created here? Is it taken a while for that to catch on, or for you guys to recognize that need because vendors are sort of locked in and they want to keep that lock on customers, and it's just harder to gain the momentum that you guys have gained? Or what do you think, why do you think there's sort of that disconnect between the way things work in this enterprise tech space versus what we see every day in our everyday
Yeah,
life?
that's a good question. In the early days, Eric, if you go back, 10, 15 years ago, when we all kind of got started in this business, you were doing a lot of education, trying to effectively teach companies, really educate companies and CIOs and their directs on what this model even is. Can you really do it? Is it valid? What's the vendor going to do to us? Things like that. I would say over the last 6 or 8 years, it has become much more mainstream in terms of, and part of that's the following Gartner's given us and some of that stuff. So that's certainly it's become a lot easier. And like I said, companies understand that this is an option out there, and so we get a lot of phone calls. We get a ton of phone calls trying to understand what the model is and what we can do for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've got a question that's going to build on that last point here in just a second. It's a great segue, but I do want to just turn to the audience real quickly and sort of recognize where people are joining from today.
Yeah.
I want to say hello to a few people. Someone on LinkedIn is from the UK. Sorry, I don't see your name, but hello. Jeff Brown from Naples, Florida, coming off LinkedIn here. Also on LinkedIn, we have someone from New York City. So thank you for being here today. So just a few examples of where people are joining from today. So thank you for everyone attending here. And then I want to say hello to Kashif, who says ERP systems are the backbone of so many businesses, but keeping them running smoothly can be a challenge. Looking forward to learning more about our options for support and maintenance on this live session. So thank you.
Great.
Hopefully you are learning about your options so far on this live session. So I want to, and again, audience questions, love to hear your questions. Anything you want to talk about, please bring it up, especially as it relates to third-party support and maintenance would be ideal, since that's our topic here today. But I wanted to ask you, Matt, sort of a burning question that I think is on a lot of people's mind. It's certainly on mine. It's on a lot of our clients have this in mind, but customers are struggling with this whole migration to the cloud. You've got SAP saying, hey, you need to be off ECC by 2027, and then we're going to cut off support. Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics is giving till, I think, 2027 or 2030, maybe it is now, for Great Plains. And they're all sort of setting these deadlines, which makes sense.
And they push them out a little bit, right? But
they're
trying to force people onto the next item inside their portfolio.
Yeah, exactly. And, I don't know about you, but me personally, and look, having been in the space for a while, just like you have been, it feels a little shady to me that, software vendors can say, hey, I know you've got all your operations and all your data in our system, but guess what? We're telling you have to get off that and you have to upgrade to something different.
Yeah.
That's a topic for another time, I suppose, is whether or not that's the right thing, whether or not the industry should be doing that.
Sure.
But what does that do for your model as far as the services you're providing customers? Are you seeing a lot of customer demand from people that are saying, hey, I don't want to necessarily move to the new version of Oracle or SAP by whatever their deadline is, their arbitrary deadline? I want to sort of preserve and extend the life cycle of my current software. Sort of how are you seeing customers navigate that forced migration to the cloud, and how do you guys fit into that equation?
Yeah, I mean, these vendors put a roadmap out. They say you need to march on this roadmap, and here's the dates in which you're going to do this. And so they really define for their customers what that roadmap is, and that roadmap, that systematic change inside their business, affects a lot of things. I mean, they've got a lot of capital inside the development cycles of putting that system in. They've got all their people trained, the business processes around that. Just the implications are pretty large. And so when they force a change onto a company, a lot of companies, nobody wants to be pushed into a certain roadmap that they don't want to be a part of. Some companies are all in on the roadmap, and they're partnering with the vendors, and they work that out, and that's fine. But there's a lot out there that say, whoa, let me have my own roadmap. Let me put together my own. And the world, as you mentioned here, is evolving so rapidly, right? There's cloud solutions out there that are much better than what a vendor has for a particular function. HR, for example, right? There's some really good cloud solutions out there. So maybe they rip the HR out of an SAP, out of an Oracle, and give it to a cloud. My point is, there's a lot of best of breed that people are trying to put together. It's kind of come back around, right? It was best of breed was a fad at one point, then kind of one vendor make it a little easier, and now you're kind of seeing back to the best of breed, especially on these cloud applications and these kind of point solutions, if you will. So what we tell our CIOs and what we tell our prospects is, listen, this is an opportunity for you to take that roadmap and put it into your own control. And whether you end up on an S/4HANA or you end up in Oracle's cloud solutions, great, but at least you do it on your own timeline. And so we can take your on-prem systems that you run today, that you've got all that capital, all those people, all those processes built around. You can literally run those as long as you want to. And again, take that roadmap back into your own control and make those decisions later at the right time for you, not at the time the vendor tells you to make it. And so that's been that freedom that you allow those companies and those IT departments to have to control their own destiny, so to speak, is not lost on a lot of people. It's really something that's part of that value proposition I was talking about earlier as well. Yeah. This is what makes these CIOs so happy, that they can take the control back, save a couple dollars, get better support. Yeah, great. But now I've got control, and now we can move down the path we want to move down and not be forced.
Yeah. What's interesting too is that there's so many companies, as you mentioned. There's a lot of companies that aren't getting the value out of the systems they have. So you've got that dynamic happening, and then in parallel, you have this dynamic of the software vendors. A lot of these software vendors like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, I'll call those three out in particular. Sure. They don't have a fully mature cloud offering yet. I mean, they're still developing it, and in a few years this will be a moot point. But right now, where we stand, they're talking about AI. They're talking about all these advanced capabilities, but there's a lot of stuff they're still working on, just getting from their legacy on-prem system over to the cloud, and they still haven't finished that transition. And so for a lot of customers, it's like you look at that and say, okay, well, the products are still very much a work in progress over here. Over here, we've got this software we've had for however many years, and we've never gotten the full value out of it. So to your point, let's operate on our own roadmap. Let's save some money along the way, and let's get some more business value. And then by 5 years down the line, maybe then it's the right time for you to start migrating and those dynamics.
The cloud is a funny word, and you know this better than anybody, Eric. I mean, it's a wide spectrum of a word, if you know what I mean, right? There's taking your on-prem and putting it into an Azure or an AWS. Are you in the cloud? Well, your systems are in the cloud, right? So that's good. It's managed by somebody else. That's been going on for a long time. But truly moving, your financials, for example, or your supply chain, manufacturing, distribution applications into a cloud environment in which you can't make changes, you can't make process changes, you can't make customizations. That's a big departure, right? That's going to be a pretty big leap for a lot of people to put their financials truly into a cloud system. We run NetSuite, right? So we actually run an Oracle product of all things, and it works really well for us given the size we are. But if you're a multi-billion-dollar, public entity or a federal government or something like that, this is going to be a pretty big leap to be in the cloud and the security that sits around all that. So we actually help a lot of customers migrate their on-prem from a data center that they might be in into a cloud environment, and then we manage the environment for them in that respect as well. So it's really where the actual applications sit are pretty indifferent to us.
Yeah. Good point.
Or the databases, for example. Yeah.
Here's an interesting question from Ellie on YouTube. Ellie said, and this is a great question. I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are, Matt, but which specific off-ramps do people use the most? And you were talking about off-ramps earlier, and I think this is a follow-up to that. But which specific off-ramps do people use the most? What do they eventually switch to? So do you have like is there a pattern or a theme you see with your customers? I'm sure every customer is different, of course, but are you seeing any patterns?
From my foxhole, you see a lot of, I would say JD Edwards kind of moving into an SAP space, like just from our foxhole, we kind of see it from that perspective. But they say they're going to do something like that. They take the off ramp of moving off the vendor support, saving a couple bucks, trying to take that control back on the roadmap. And then they realize that roadmap might change in 2, 3, 5 years. And so they may make different decisions at that point. Some people say, I'm going to run this JD Edwards version until it just dies, right? Until it literally falls over and I've got to go do something. They'll obviously change before then, but just run that as much as they can, and then add in what I'll call more of the business value on top of it. It could be digital transformation, it could be AI solutions, lots of things companies are trying to fund and find out there to implement and add business value. Changing your financial system from a JD Edwards to an SAP, it's not a huge amount of value to these companies. So it's a little bit of what we run into that's helpful.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So we talked about supporting customers who might be struggling with vendor deadlines. I want to come back to that just for a second, though.
Yeah.
Do you see a lot of customers that you're working with now that are able to extend their timeline or their upgrade timeline to where they sort of get that breathing room to say, hey, SAP saying 2027, but Spinnaker is sort of giving us a lifeline here to give us at least till whatever timeline we want.
You hit the nail on the head, Eric. That's exactly what it is, right? So, 2027 is just 3 years from now, right? And so it's coming at them very quickly. To make a change like this it's got budget implications, obviously approval implications, it's got regulatory implications. There's a lot that goes into switching out your mission critical systems that really run and operate the backbone of your company. And so the being able to have that, again, that roadmap back into your own hands is really important. But that timeline is really irrelevant to us, if that makes sense. I mean, in many ways, it's just something that, again, if you make the switch over to Spinnaker, SAP, they put this timeline out. It may push a year or two, but they've got to put some fences on this thing to get people to move, right?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, our SAP group is busier than they've ever been in their lives right now with these customers saying, hey, I don't want to be tied to that timeline. What can you do for me? And so those are conversations we're having all the time. But there's a huge lifeline here, a huge off-ramp that they can take control, and that 27 date comes and goes, and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've seen that stat. I think it was Gartner or McKinsey that said that roughly 2/3 of ECC customers have not yet started their migration to S/4HANA. So you've got 2/3 of the market that, to your point, probably isn't going to get there. They're probably not going to get there by 2027. So
I don't even know if there's enough consultants out there to help do this. You're talking about tens of thousands of companies that have got to make this change. So the market itself, right? I know the big SIs are obviously out there trying to put the teams together, but it's massive.
Yeah, they're going to be inevitably they'll be scraping the bottom of the barrel at some point to get the consultants they need to handle that sort of
exactly right. And then it gets delayed and all kinds of it just you introduce a lot of risk into a company, right? And so that's another thing we talk to CIOs is you can make a change, but the risk that you're taking on and the lifeline that CIOs actually have, or the lifespan, if you will, is short. There's all kinds of statistics out there that there are 2 or 3 years and they get rotated out. So the risk you're introducing into your company versus the value you're getting out of it is something that is really is being evaluated pretty heavy. And that's what McKinsey's opining on, and Gartner and Forrester and these guys.
Yeah. You said it really well too. I think that's the way organizations need to think, especially if you're more of a, on a continuum, you're more of a risk adverse organization. That's not a bad word. I don't think that's a bad thing to be risk adverse. I mean, if you're a heavily regulated industry or you've been around for decades and you have a lot to lose, you're going to be more conservative. And why take on the risk? Like you said, if you can find this lifeline that gives you a more conservative approach to how you go about it and lets you operate on your timeline. I mean,
it's really a balance of risk versus reward, right? I mean, it's how much are you going to, what value are you going to get out of migrating these systems that are really just backbone systems, if you will, versus taking some savings, having a better support solution, de-risking your business, and adding value on digital transformation, cloud software, whatever it is you want to go do, that adds a lot more value to the business than a new financial system or a new manufacturing system.
Yeah.
Very painful to do that.
Yeah. I have a feeling you and I are making many in the vendor community cringe a little bit right now. As we
no doubt about it. But I'm used to it, Eric. It's the business I'm in, so I'm kind of used to it.
You're foiling their plans. It's like, damn it, Matt, we want everyone on this new system by 2027, and you're not supporting our message here.
We're a terrific off-ramp, but there's a few other vendors out there too, but it gives options to the market. And that's what's cool in talking to these CIOs. They just love to have that control back in their own office and not being driven by somebody else or a vendor of all things, right? So
yeah.
Well, it's very big and very powerful. So
yes, and you're bringing up a whole nother thread I wasn't planning on asking you about necessarily, but I think it's important to mention it or sort of build on what you just said. That vendor lock is a real thing. When you move to the cloud now, I mean, companies are already struggling with vendor lock as it is, because if you've got one big ERP vendor providing all of your applications for your entire company, that in and of itself is somewhat of a vendor lock. But now if you move all that stuff on-prem to the cloud, they control everything. That's even more vendor lock. So you're sort of offering this option to sort of put control back. You're sort of balancing the power out a little bit here, which I think is what is needed. I think there's too much power concentrated in the software vendors right now.
It's a lot. There's no doubt about it. And some of the companies, what I'll say too, is the sophistication and the regulatory, entity, the regulated industries out there are making these switches as well. I mean, and I'm going to be truthful with you. 3 or 4 years ago, I would have never thought large banks would come over, or federal government, not the US, but in Europe and in Asia. We've got federal governments moving over to third-party management. You have some very sophisticated clients out there that are very risk adverse and highly regulated, still making this change. It's incredible. So it's fun to watch.
Yeah, it's a perfect segue into another great question from Ali. Which industries are pushing back the most? You mentioned banking and finance. It was an industry maybe there's lagging a little bit that you didn't expect to come over to this third-party support model. But are there other industries that you think are more ripe for it or less ripe for it relative to one another?
I think if you're in a high-tech environment, a fast-growing business, if you're an Apple, an Nvidia, those types of environments, it's probably not the best move at that point because you're growing so fast. Lots of acquisitions or some company kind of doing those types of strategic moves. The clients we're seeing, we're seeing a lot of banking customers come over. We're seeing a lot of telecom, like huge telecom businesses making these changes as well. Massive brand name telecom companies that you would know making this change. A lot of manufacturing, distribution, and really what's picked up in the last couple of years for obvious reasons is retail. The suffering that the retail industry has really had. We've got a lot of great brand names in the retail industry, big box stores that you drive by and you see everywhere, or in the mall stores. So those are some of the big industries that we see kind of making the change right now. But if you're in the acquisition binge market and you're growing like a weed or lots of change going on, it's probably a little bit more difficult because you got to manage the license counts and all kinds of stuff like that when you make this change.
Yeah, makes sense. Here's another comment from Ali. He's on a roll here with his commentary, but he's doubling down on our comment earlier. But he's saying it's great to see the free market pushing back against monopolistic practices. I was thinking about using that word, but I thought that's a little strong. But I'll hold off. But I'm glad Ali brought it up.
But Ali did it.
Yeah, exactly. Now my hands are clean. I didn't say the word, but it is kind of monopolistic, and you guys are providing an option in the free market.
Yeah.
And then he says the dealer service analogy is perfect, which I agree with.
Good. Yeah.
So let's talk about lawsuits in the space. This is a super interesting topic because those that have followed this space for a while, and obviously you and I have been in the space following it even before Spinnaker came around. There's been some lawsuits over the years. One relatively recent one being Rimini Street, where vendors sue third-party support providers. Can you tell us a little bit about the legal landscape and how that has settled itself and how it affects your strategy going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question, and it's one that comes up almost every time. I'll give the analogy of driving down the street. If the street sign says 25 miles an hour, then you go 25 miles an hour, right? That's the speed limit. Right. Even if it's a wide open street, nobody's on the street, it's still a 20, that's the law, right? And so if you go 35 because you think you should be able to, you're going to have a problem. The lines are very clear with respect to the IP, and that's where the lawsuits are, is the IP side of the house, of what you can and can't do, right? We don't own the IP, so I can't develop a solution, for example, inside one customer's systems, take that solution back out and share that with other customers. I'm actually technically reselling that software because I don't own the software. If you implement something into somebody's system, whether they are on third party or not, technically the vendor owns that. It's called derivative code. They don't know they own it. It's not published or anything like that, but it sits within that. And so you've got to be very careful on pulling stuff out and doing other stuff with it. That's really a lot of the lawsuits that have kind of gone. The lawsuit has been going on, I think, with Rimini for, I don't know, 12 or 14 years at this point, something like that, 11, 12. There's probably lawyers that have never had another case that they've dealt with. from Spinnaker's perspective, I'm not going to opine on Rimini's lawsuits or where they stand with that. I really don't know. I don't follow it every day.
Right.
But from our perspective, we know where the line is. It's very, very clear. It's something that we've talked to Oracle about in the past, of where those lines are, what we can and can't do. It's very obvious what we can and can't do. And so we don't need to do anything that even comes close to a violation of IP. We have an IP policy that all of our folks sign and understand. We work with our clients on that. If they send us a snapshot or a screenshot of IP, something that Oracle owns, we actually go back to them. We quarantine that thing, and we go back to them and say, hey, don't send us anything like that. We don't want those in our own systems. And so it's very clear, and customers love to operate within those boundaries as well. They respect that, and we certainly respect the heck out of it as well. And it hasn't affected anything from an operations perspective or our delivery capacity.
So just to be clear, to summarize, make sure I'm following you, the lawsuits and the legal issues that have existed in this space are not because of the model itself. It's not because you're a third-party provider providing support that vendors typically provide. It's because there's some sort of IP infringement or that line that's being crossed. And that's, as long as you don't cross that line, you're good. So there's not a legal issue of having third-party support.
No, the model itself, I mean, Safra Katz herself has come out and said the model's valid. I understand it. Companies can use third-party as a tool. I'm not sure she is excited she said that, or probably regrets a little bit of it, but irrespective of that, it's not the model at all. That's been fully validated. There's no issue there. It's really how you do it. And that's no different than almost any industry out there. There's unscrupulous practices, and I just don't need to see those. We don't have any issues with those.
It seems like if you're a vendor and you're really thinking long term, it seems like you would want to build this robust ecosystem of third-party providers. And I think vendors are recognizing in some ways where a lot of vendors are creating these third-party app platforms where, they're inviting and opening up their platforms for others to create apps in their system. And they're not necessarily, they are benefiting directly and indirectly, but it's not necessarily the IP of that software vendor, but they're creating this ecosystem of third-party app developers. Certainly the SIs have always been around. Why not add third-party, embrace the third-party support option, knowing that if your customers are getting more value and not saving as much money or not paying as much money, getting a better ROI, why not encourage people to get more value and lower cost out of the product that you sold them as a vendor?
Yeah, it's a pretty simple business model, right? It's a faster, better, cheaper model, right? And you really do get a lot of value out of moving to it. And part of it is the value of the support itself and how great we are and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, it's that control that they have now. They got out of that vendor lock. Now they have their own. I see a question out there on this, right? That you've got this vendor lock going on, and if you're paying maintenance, they're going to expect you to move on. And so I think it's really the control aspect is something that should not be overlooked at all. I think that's probably one of the biggest hidden benefits out there, if you will.
Yeah. And back to that question for Megan on LinkedIn, are there other ways? Obviously, having third-party support and maintenance is one way to sort of mitigate that vendor lock dynamic. Is there any other tips or suggestions you see your customers taking advantage of?
Well, yeah, I think that what we see from our foxhole is customers will move to a third party. They'll come to us. We'll start talking to them about their landscape, what their strategy is. We really become part of that conversation with them, help them through some of the technical elements of that. But then you see people move maybe from an Oracle database into a Postgres, right? Some open source database solutions out there. So we're seeing quite a bit of that. So they start taking pieces and parts of their Oracle or SAP landscape and moving those to open source solutions, third-party maintenance solutions. They take the hardware, put it to third-party hardware providers out there. There's some terrific ones out there that have grown a lot over the last couple of decades as well. So they're doing, I would say, more pieces and parts of their landscape are moving to different vendors, if you will.
Yeah. Makes
people aren't thinking I need Oracle for everything or I need SAP for everything. That mindset has been shifted quite a bit, and we provide sort of that off ramp, if you will, to help them make that shift.
Yeah. And one of the questions I had for you, which I think we've covered pretty well, is what are some of the benefits of third-party support that Spinnaker provides? You talked about cost savings, more value out of your existing investments in technology, mitigating vendor lock, or any other sort of high-level benefits you'd point to that come from the third-party support model?
I think it's just that refreshing element of that vendor lock and having that roadmap and control, right? And I
Control, yeah.
think that, the CIOs understand that more than anybody. The CFOs really understand the money side of it. And when you combine those two things, you really have a win-win for these companies as they go forward. The support and our service delivery and what they get out of us is sort of a huge benefit as well. I mean, we become an extension really to these IT departments. You can take some of your best and brightest IT folks inside your own business, move them onto more strategic projects and trying to manage or maintain software and databases and things like that. Move that to us. We'll take that on. And they've got their talent that can go do some more more important things inside their business. They know the business processes, they know the politics, they know what they need to get done and how to get it done. They can use vendors obviously on the outside to help them do some of that stuff, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is very cool. How do you see the third-party support model evolving with the evolution of the cloud, and as more customers move to a cloud and especially public or multi-tenant SaaS solutions?
Yep.
How do you see your business model and the overall third-party support model evolving, since more, you're, like I said, we're moving towards more of a vendor lock system with these multi-tenant SaaS solutions that are going to be all in the cloud now?
Yeah.
How does your business model evolve, or how do you see it evolving with that?
It's interesting. We had a study done by PwC maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And, there's this concept, is this a melting ice cube? Is this market going to just melt down to nothing at some point? There's still, we talk about the mainframe systems out there. There's mainframe systems all over the world still running,
Yeah.
So the tail on these things is incredible. As the cloud becomes more and more mainstream, I'll call it, multi-tenant SaaS products out there, what we're seeing is it's certain solutions that are moving to that. Supply chain solutions, HR solutions, self-service, things like that. So what we're really finding is the financials, manufacturing, just these really backbone ERP systems are just residing on that on-prem. They may move them to a cloud environment in order to gain some efficiencies from a cost perspective. But those licenses are their perpetual licenses are really sitting around for quite a while. So it's,
Yeah.
I think as the cloud market grows, so does the third-party maintenance market, if that makes sense, because companies are saying, well, I don't know what cloud I'm going to go to. I don't know if there's a cloud out there yet for a $50 billion oil company, right? Can they really handle what we have? And so it's just created a lot of open doors for us and a lot of phone calls with us and meetings on the prospect side to talk through what those really options are. So I think as the cloud grows, the maintenance market grows, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough. Yeah.
I also wonder if, like a pendulum swing that we've seen in this industry over the years. I wonder if that, obviously the pendulum is swinging pretty hard towards cloud and SaaS, but I wonder if 10 years from now, as people step back and look and say, wow, I'm spending a lot of money on the SaaS solution, and it kind of sucks being locked into this vendor even more than I already was before.
Yep.
I kind of want to think about this on-prem thing again. Maybe, a part of me wonders if that pendulum swings back a little bit and settles somewhere in the middle to where cloud's not going to go away. I don't think, obviously.
No, yeah.
There's too much money and momentum and technological advances in that space, especially with AI and everything. But I do wonder if there's certain pockets that will push back on cloud longer term, to where they do want to have like a more, not a custom dev solution, but something that they can tailor themselves and create a competitive advantage, and not just have a public cloud that everyone else is using. It's okay for financials maybe, but if you think about like your customer service or your product development, product lifecycle management, things like that, it might be more compelling to have something that's unique to you that gives you an advantage. So I could see like there being a constant market grow, potentially even growing for that type of support for different applications that do that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, you might have a pendulum swing back to more of an on-prem, environment. Or personally, again, from our foxhole, Eric, we're not really seeing a lot of interest in moving some of the core applications out there into the cloud.
Yeah.
So
same here.
You said you have the vendors, announce that they've got all these cloud solutions, they've got all these cloud licenses. I'm not sure, and I think there's a lot written about this. It's not just opine from me, but how much of those are really getting implemented? How much of those are really getting put into action, or if they're just sitting kind of on the shelf, so to speak?
Yeah. What about, here's an interesting question that I hadn't really thought of. This is from Megan on LinkedIn. And she says, when companies use parts of Oracle along with other systems, how do you see that combination working together? Is there more of a benefit of doing so? And maybe I'll broaden that question a little bit and just say, do you guys if you've got an Oracle customer
Yep.
that you're providing third-party support and maintenance to, do you also address the other apps that bolt on to the Oracle EBS or whatever the solution is?
Yeah, I think there's a couple parts to this question, but most definitely, right? So if something, Oracle's been around 30, 40 years, I don't really know exactly, but it's been around forever. And the systems are pretty well built. And there's not a lot of like true maintenance issues inside an application or a database. Other things happen to it, right, that make it go down. If a company can't run AR or AP, it's probably something that happened inside. So it's probably a data corruption issue, an integration issue, data in that corrupts the system and makes it fall over or go bump in the night. So to me, we're not just maintaining the Oracle system or the SAP system. We're also helping them with all the integrations that go on. And so that's a little bit of a broadening of the service that we have that the vendor doesn't provide. Something like that happens, they say, hey, call your consulting firm, right? Then you've got to bring a company in, you've got to get them up to speed on what you do. Meanwhile, you can't run payroll, or you can't run, AP. I mean, you've got some real significant, P1 type issues that go on. And if we're already there, we know how to solve these things. Again, generally it's kind of a data corruption issue or an integration issue or a report can't run. Those are the things we step into and help. But the core application itself doesn't really break, so to speak, right? It's pretty well built by the vendors.
Well, I'm glad we got to that. I'm glad Megan asked that because I wasn't aware that you guys provide the support to integration to other systems and things like that. It's a great point because I imagine a lot of people are in that sort of not best of breed necessarily, but that whatever you want to call it, the 2-tier ERP model. Where
you run Oracle. That doesn't mean all your applications are going to be on Oracle, right?
Right.
And you've got a lot of things you can kind of go to.
Right. Yeah. What about we started to touch on this in this last question about how you think the third-party support model will evolve. To the extent you can share it, what are some of your other future strategies you're working on, and where do you see, where are you taking Spinnaker in the future beyond where you are today? Which by the way, congratulations on your success. You and I met. We didn't talk about this at the beginning. We talked about it before we went live here, but you and I met 15 years ago probably, and you were just starting out. It was close to 15 years, and you were just starting out. And Spinnaker was sort of a really up and coming high growth thing, but nothing like it is today. You hadn't gotten into the support and all the stuff you're doing now. So congratulations on that growth, because you guys have done a great job. But where do you see it going from here as you look to the future?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of avenues, right? I think that we can, and we're evaluating these avenues all the time, quite frankly. But our core right now is Oracle and SAP. We have some other applications out there that we do services for as well, like Postgres and some things like that. All those are on our website if you want to go take a look at it. Microsoft, I think, is a big market out there that we've just started to scratch the surface on a little bit. We have a lot of customers asking us about that. And you probably know more about this than anybody, Eric. VMware and the change that they've made here with Broadcom and that acquisition has caused a lot of angst in the market and inquiries on what we could do around VMware. So we're evaluating several different packages to move into that might be really driven. And this is really how we've grown. It's really been customer demand. We had the JD Edwards Group, I don't know, going back to 08, I said, and somewhere kind of in the early 12, 13, somewhere in there, we had one CIO call up who was a JD Edwards customer at one point, and she had moved over to an Oracle shop and said, you're going to do Oracle. You're going to figure this out. Here's a contract to do it. And that's what really launched us into the whole Oracle space going back to 2012, 13. And so we get that pull demand from our customer base. So I spend a lot of time talking to CIOs, talking to their groups on what their issues are, what they're faced with. And so there's a couple of global markets we're entering too as well, and that we haven't really been into. We've got a lot of partnerships in the world. I got to give a big shout out to IBM, probably one of our best partners out there, and it really saves them. It's a huge partnership that we're able to do globally with them, where they save a lot of money for their customers by leveraging something like us, give that value back to that customer, and then use those funds to go do other stuff with those customers they've got. So great partnership there. We're expanding our partnership opportunities with a lot of companies out there that have client relationships that want to try and participate in this market. So it's kind of partnerships, it's software and different packages out there, and it's markets that we're not into as well from a geography perspective. So we're busy kind of at the strategy level, kind of working all those things out. But as we roll them out, we'll make those announcements.
Right. Sounds great. Well, that's cool. That's exciting. I mean, there's so much changing in this space, and who knows what the market's going to look like in 10 years. I mean, as much as you and I have experience in this space, I don't think you or I really know
Uh-uh.
what's going to happen here in 5 or 10 years, and that creates a
No,
lot of opportunity for
it
you.
really does. It's. I think the trend that I'm seeing, Eric, from a growth perspective, is the size of the businesses, the complexity of the governments and the companies that are bringing and entertaining and moving over to a third party. 8, 10 years ago, it was smaller manufacturing, smaller retail. And now you've got, the first and the third largest bank in Australia. I mean, you've got some massive organizations, highly regulated organizations, and those making the move. So that trend is just continuing. Large telecom companies are making the change, and so it's the size and breadth of those customers is something that's pretty cool to watch, but certainly something we can handle, and it's been fun to manage those. So
Yeah, that's great. That's really cool.
yeah.
So, what advice do you have for organizations that are trying to decide if third-party support is right for them? Do you have some criteria that you look at, or that when you're selling or when you're qualifying a potential customer? Are there
Yeah.
certain traits that they tend to have, or things that you look for that suggest they might be a good fit for third-party maintenance and support?
Yeah, part of it is, what's the strategy of the organization? Like, what direction are you trying to go in? Are you trying to maintain what you've got and add to it from a digital transformation or other applications, other value added business drivers into your organization? Or are you upgrading all the time? Are you on an 18-month upgrade cycle? That would maybe not be a great fit for us. Like, not every company is a perfect fit for third party maintenance. And I'll say that out loud. I know my marketing group probably doesn't really like that, but at the end of the day, you've got to be in the right spot at the right time, and I recognize that sometimes it takes a year or two, because these are annual cycles, right? So if you have an annual contract with an Oracle or an SAP and you sign up for that, there's really nothing you can do until that annual cycle ends again. So I would suggest 3 to 6 months before that maintenance end date. It's a very important date. SAP 99 point something percent are all December 31st, and you've got to give 90-day notifications. So right now, kind of April through August is really decision time for those organizations to really evaluate it. So, we're not an organization that beats down the doors, that calls above you. We're just open to conversations. I want to entertain and understand, help you understand what the options are in the market. Talking's free. Learning is free. There's really no reason not to just give us a call and really kind of explore what the options are. Like I said, we're not going to bang the doors down and really try and drumbeat the whole phone systems and things like that. We're pretty respectful to everybody. Everybody gets sold to, but what we're trying to do is just educate.
Right. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And actually, while we're wrapping up here, Matt, I'm going to put a QR code up on the screen, top left corner of the screen, for those of
Right.
you watching this podcast, and we'll include it in the podcast show notes for those of you that are listening. But if you scan the QR code here, there's a free download that you guys have provided at Spinnaker.
Great.
And the download, I couldn't fit it in the title here, but it's called "What IT Leaders Need to Know About Third-Party Oracle and SAP Support." So if you want to learn more about, kind of what this third-party support model is and how it works and what some of the advantages are, a lot of the stuff that Matt and I have talked about, but even more detail, check out this white paper that Spinnaker has made available to us. So thank you.
Like I said, and you asked about this, I encourage, of course I encourage this, but encourage you to reach out to us. We've got a lot of Gartner papers, third-party, validation documents and collateral that might help you guys, help companies understand what the market is, what we can do, what the options really are. Again, we're not a heavy sales organization where we're going to just pound the phones on you. We're just really an education group, right? And that's really what our organization is kind of built around, in terms of just educating the market. You make the decisions you make, and it's not something we can talk you into, but this is something that is an option I think should be evaluated, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And this collateral will help, and then we've got a lot more on our website, and we can share a lot more kind of that we've got, we can't put on the website necessarily, that we're happy to distribute.
Happy to have a conversation and chat about it.
Yeah.
And then last question I have for you then is, you're evaluating potential third-party support options like a Spinnaker or one of your competitors. What are some of the criteria buyers should be using to say, hey, is this the right vendor for me to provide the maintenance and support I need?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, can they maintain the systems? Do they have companies that are doing this as well? I think for our perspective, education is really important, but references are really important, right? So we really encourage companies to leverage our references out there. And I know we give all the best references. And I know that's kind of the what
Right.
everybody says, but CIO to CIO, they learn a lot and they talk a lot. And so I encourage that as part of this process as well. But I think also, culture is important. And we kind of beat that drum pretty well that, we want to work with you guys. We want to be a partner with the company, not a vendor to the company. We're going to work well with your organization. We are culturally a great fit for many organizations. We work well with other third-party vendors out there that work with like a managed services group. If they've got one of the large, managed services groups, we work well with them. We're not a sharp elbow, they did it, it's their fault, not us. We're all here to work and make it successful for the companies. And that culture permeates through our entire organization. And that's been a benefit to us.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for companies to understand that.
Yeah. And to evaluate that as part of their
for sure
process, for sure. So this, this resource right here, I'm trying to figure out where my finger needs to be right there, is that you scan that QR code if you want to learn more about this third-party support model. And again, if you're listening, we'll have it in the show notes. Beyond this white paper, which you guys have provided, I've also included another link in the notes about just learning more about third-party support. So you can download this white paper here. There's another link below for another resource that Spinnaker has provided. So giving you ample stuff to get started on your research journey here as you consider, or at least think about, how could third-party support and maintenance fit into our overall roadmap. But beyond that, Matt, how can people connect with you? How do they learn more about Spinnaker? What are our next steps?
Hit our website for sure, and reach out to us. There's ways to get in touch with us on the Contact Us page. Very easy to find, very easy to fill out a form. Again, we don't dump that. We don't sell that. We don't put you into a spam, operation around here. So feel free to reach out, put a Contact Us in there, and I'll have somebody reach out to you guys right away and just have a conversation. Again, kind of education is really an important element here. It's not we're not a great spam operator around here, and nor will we ever be. It's just not what we do. So don't feel shy about putting an email in there. We'll get back to you and try and set some time up. So
great. Yeah. Well, very cool. I appreciate you being here today, Matt. This is a great
conversation. Great to see you. Great to see you again. And congratulations on all the success with your podcast and everything going on. It's really cool to watch. So
yeah, absolutely. You too. Like I said, we go, it's fun to have a catch up here live in front of an audience. You and I haven't talked in so long. So it's great to finally catch up here after many years. So it's good to see you again. Congratulations on your success. Thank you to the audience for listening.
Yep.
This interview, we'll edit it, polish it up, add music and cool looking stuff to it to make it part of our official podcast episodes that come out on Transformation Ground Control. This will be out in a few weeks on that weekly show, which you can find at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The interview has a dual purpose, though, because so much of what Spinnaker does is in the SAP space, in addition to Oracle and other software vendors. This will also be featured on our Journey to S4HANA podcast. So you can go to journeyto s4hana.com to see past episodes of that show, and then you'll see this one pop up here in the not too distant future there. So thank you everyone for being here. Have a great week, and we will see you next time on our live stream. Take care.